Hello, welcome to our Sockeye market update. My name is Andy Wink. I'm the Executive Director for the Bristol Bay Regional Seafood Development Association. And today I wanted to update our members on Sockeye market conditions as of here in early February 2023. So let's jump right into it. We'll start with the good news and the bad news. Good news is, there's still a large demand for healthy, clean protein like Bristol Bay sockeye. And over time, we've seen that demand grow. We have a great story. It's a very, comes from clean habitat. And that's the type of food that consumers are more and more looking to purchase. We have excellent market awareness and a large customer base, particularly on the heels of the EPA action to protect Bristol Bay. We're in the news even more so in recent weeks. Bristol Bay also is, the most abundant supply of premium wild salmon on the planet. So we definitely have that going for us. The lower 2023 forecast should probably blunt the effect somewhat of potential carryover. I guess all things equal, it's probably better not to have a massive forecast and harvest in 2023 coming on the heels of the record 2022 harvest. Some other things working as tailwinds. There's an outlook for constrained supply of farm salmon and beef in 2023. Our resource is very healthy, and that critical habitat has had some additional protections put into place recently, which should give people more confidence moving forward as well. And finally, there should be more excess processing capacity in 2023, and that should probably make the fishery somewhat more competitive, although there's a lot of other factors which we'll discuss here. But all things equal, if there's more excess processing capacity, then there's more incentive to bid away boats from other processors and that sort of thing. So hopping over to some of the headwinds that we're facing. 2022 was a massive season, record harvest of 60 million sockeye in Bristol Bay. The previous record was 45 million or thereabouts. And so that increases the chance for carryover inventory into the next season. And because we had such a large harvest, there's a potential for a large inventory. There's also a lot of supply chain costs and complexities, which are still with us even as we kind of come out of COVID. Interest rates have moved higher. That increases the cost to buy and hold inventory. It increases the cost of money and financing, obviously. And then you've got labor cost and productivity. Labor costs are rising. When you bring on new workers, it takes a while to get them up to speed and that sort of thing. Supply chain issues. There's, cold storage capacity is very tight. There's still a lot of logistic hiccups and struggles throughout the supply chains. And they're all also starting to react to the recessionary pressures. And then insurance too. Insurance costs are going up, and insurance is a big cost. Another tailwind that's significant is a strong US dollar. In general, the stronger the dollar, the worse that is for Alaska salmon producers, because it makes our exports relatively more expensive to foreign buyers. And it also makes imported seafood and salmon cheaper to US buyers in terms of, dollar conversion rates. And so we've seen the strength of the dollar come down a little bit in recent months, but it's still pretty high compared, to a longer historical period. And then, like I said, a lot of industries and sectors are sort of bracing for a recession. We've started to see consumer spending pull back a little bit as consumers are becoming a lot more price conscious, sensitive to inflation. We all know prices are going up, especially in food. And we're seeing that start to have an impact on sales dollars and particularly on sales volumes. So just a few bits of data here I want to update you guys on. This is the average promotional price of sockeye and Atlantic salmon. at retail. And so when you get those weekly circulars that have all the sale prices of various products, a company called Berry puts that into their database, and then we average out the circular prices for Sockeye and Atlantics by quarter. And so you can see there for a while, you know, the trend was that Sockeye fillets were increasing in price at retail. And then in Q4, they dropped down pretty significantly, roughly $1 there. And you can see Atlantics have pulled back as well through Q4. So, you know, I think what we're starting to see here is lower prices in the wholesale market starting to kind of flow through and affect the retail side. A lot of what's driving this lower price is we're seeing more instances of Sockeye being put on sale for $9.99, and so that's driving down that average price. You know, you'll still see some promos for $14.99 or $12.99, but we're seeing more $9.99 ones now than we did the last you know, several quarters. This is a chart we update and keep an eye on over the years. It just shows kind of where the money goes in terms of the Bristol Bay sockeye fishery. So the dark and light blue bars there, that's the total dollars that is received by fishermen, both drift and set net. And then the light gray bar is what is retained by processors from their total wholesale sales. So, you know, you can kind of see there, generally when there is a skinny gray bar, when processors didn't have as strong of a gross margin, that tends to result, or we tend to see lower ex-vessel prices of the next year, excuse me. And then we tend to see the percentage of dollars paid to fishermen be lower in those years as well. So, you know, that happened in 2014, 2015, that happened in 2019 and 2020. And we don't have sales data yet for 2022, so we don't know where this is going to end up. But, you know, in general, as the wholesale value of Bristol Bay sockeye has increased, fishermen have generally gotten a higher percentage of that value. Recently, BBRSDA staff attended the Global Seafood Marketing Conference put on by National Fisheries Institute. And there was a lot of great presentations and info shared there. So I wanted to share some of that with our members. On the supply side, the outlook for farm salmon and trout, these are all farm species, is pretty flat. You can see there the 2023 expectation up maybe 0.3%. And, you know, what we've also heard at these presentations for several years is that global demand for salmon seems to be kind of growing at about 5 to 8% per year. And so we've had this sort of flat supply trend since 2021. And so the outlook is kind of that the market's probably going to tighten even more or continue to do that in 2023, just for salmon in general. And so that, you know, should provide a little bit of a tailwind, as there's lots of, you know, there's going to be a lot of buyers out there looking for salmon because there's not as much farm supply, or at least farm supplies aren't keeping up with demand, right? On the retail sales side, this is retail sales of all various seafood species by category in 2022 versus the previous year. And you can see there that, you know, for frozen and refrigerated, the dollars and the poundage is down. The volume shrinking faster than the dollars tells you that prices are up. Frozen's done a little bit better than refrigerated. Shelf stable is done, you know, the best in dollar terms, but it's the smallest category. And you know, canned sockeye is a very small part of that category as well. So starting to see retail sales kind of pull back a little bit in 2022. And then when we look at species, you know, when we look at the data by species, these are the kind of top selling products or species for refrigerated fin fish, with salmon being the largest. And so as you kind of look through here, you can see that salmon, even though the volume of salmon sold fell 3.5%, the dollars were up 6.6%, so that's good. But salmon's really been performing better than all the other species here at retail. So, it's certainly not something that's confined to salmon. We're seeing sales pull back even more of other species. So, but this is just 22 versus 2021. And with the pandemic affecting so much, I think it's important to take a little bit more expansive view and see how things have changed, over the last 5 years. So they had a great slide on this. You can see the 5-year growth in sales dollars and volume. Fresh salmon up almost 50%, frozen salmon up almost 50%, canned up a lot less, but still up in dollars nonetheless. And then you can kind of see that as the dollars are growing faster than the volume, again, that is, that tells you that prices are going higher, and especially so for frozen salmon. So, that could mean that we're seeing perhaps more sockeye, which is, tends to be a higher priced frozen salmon product. That might be selling better. So just thought that was kind of interesting context, because I think through the pandemic, there was a lot of elation about, oh, sales are up, double digits, or even in some cases over 40% in dollar terms for some species. And then, oh my gosh, they're down 10%. Yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of volatility. And so how do we look over a longer period? And this really tells you that just a lot of salmon, we're selling a lot more salmon that the retailers are than 5 years ago. In terms of broadline sales, which is broadline distributors selling to restaurants and food service operators, as we keep coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing restaurant traffic pick up, and so overall sales of salmon have increased quite a bit in 2022. Atlantic is the bulk of the volume. Sales of Atlantic salmon were up 16%. Sockeye is a lot smaller niche here, but sales of sockeye in poundage increased the most out of any of the species here at 21.3%. So I think that's great. That probably tells us that more sockeye is going on more menus, and that's what we want to see. That's what we've been trying to push and do for several years here, and we'll continue to do that. I think there's a big opportunity in food service for sockeye. This is a chart that shows a leading index that is used to kind of gauge economic health. And you can see that basically whenever this line falls between or below negative 0.4, we tend to have a recession follow that. And so, that's gone 8 for 8 in over the last, since 1970. And we just recently dipped below that. So, the data is telling us we're likely headed for a recession. There's sort of lots of warning bells for that. And I think consumer spending is probably reacting somewhat to that as well. So we'll have to see what happens in the rest of 2023. But, I think businesses are definitely bracing for a recession. Another slide that I found interesting from GSMC was a presenter mentioned that they had talked with more than 80 companies, executives from a whole bunch of different industries. And the common theme was that they're very laser focused on smoothing out their supply chains, dealing with the issues there, trying to address and respond to labor shortages, and trying to automate whatever they can. And so you can see from the chart on the left here, that just sort of measures how much mess there is in the global supply chain. And of course, during the pandemic, there was a lot of pressure there. And so we've come down from the highs, but the supply chain pressure index is still well above pre-pandemic levels. And then on the labor side, our labor participation rate is still, a fair bit below where it was pre-pandemic, which kind of, puts data behind how bad is this labor shortage. Seems like it's easing somewhat and might continue to do so, especially if we have a recession. But we're not back to where we were basically. So let's take a look at a look at 2023 just as we sit here in early February. I've kind of run through the tailwinds and the headwinds. I would say that in general, unless we see sales of sockeye pick up dramatically, the outlook for 2023 is probably not as good for fishermen as it was in 2021 or 2022. But there's a lot of data left that still has to come in, and so we'll see. One thing that I did want to run through was a price model, which we've been kind of tracking for a few years. And the genesis of this was I've been doing these market presentations for quite a few years now, and I've had, kind of finally in 2020, I had enough fishermen ask, all right, you always tell us about the dollar, you tell us about wholesale sales and, a bunch of other stuff. Is there any way to just boil all that down to what it means for its effect on ex-vessel price? And I really didn't think that that was going to work, or that there was, enough consistency from year to year to be able to have some sort of formula. But I looked at a bunch of different factors that I thought would affect the ex-vessel price for Bristol Bay sockeye, and 3 ended up being statistically significant in terms of like their predictive value. And so I looked at data from 2011 to 2019, which kind of is our modern period here with the Bristol Bay sockeye fishery. Lots of refrigerated product, lots of frozen fillets, a lot more of it going to US retail, all that sort of stuff. And so those 3 factors are the harvest volume of Bristol Bay sockeye in millions of fish, the previous season's net processing revenue, and that in millions of dollars. And so that is how much do processors sell in terms of their wholesale sales of Bristol Bay sockeye in the previous season, less what they paid fishermen that year or for that season. And then the third input is the January through May frozen H&G sockeye export price per pound. So that kind of gives us a benchmark of pricing headed into the season, right? And the nice thing about these inputs is that they're not things we have to wait months and months for after the season to have a pretty good idea about. We generally know them, or can get pretty close on estimating them really in May or June. Of course, we don't know the harvest volume till it's in, but we have a forecast, which we can use in place of that until we know the harvest. But what I found was that these factors really did a good job of predicting past actual prices. The adjusted R-squared of 0.98 is extremely high. And then you can see the difference there between the modeled price and the actual price. And again, I did this in 2020, so it's looking backwards, right? So that's the model's job, is to try to fit the data that we have as best we can and see if we can pass predict. So that was very interesting to see. And so going forward, I would say the model did a good job of predicting the trend, the overall direction of pricing, but it didn't do it was not nearly as precise as it was when we started kind of looking forward and getting past 2019. So it's tended to project the ex-vessel price versus what was actually paid. So you can see the line there, and just before 2020, that was that was when the model was created. And then going forward, I'm still using the same relationships from 2011 to 2019 because they fit so tightly, but it hasn't been as accurate in the last 3 seasons or so. So maybe why is that, or digging a bit more into that. You know, you can see there the difference was 19 cents off in 2020, 26 cents off in 2021. And I think that the COVID costs and uncertainty had a lot to do with that. You know, there just was a lot of COVID costs, which that was not something that was present in 2019 or earlier. There's a lot of business uncertainty that year. Also in 2020, the harvests in the rest of Alaska for salmon were really bad. If you take out the bay, 2020 was the worst Alaska salmon harvest since 1979. So there was probably a lot of you know, costs to make up for from operating around the state with where they didn't get as much fish as they usually do. And then in 2020, you know, that produced a pretty high net processing revenue. So it's kind of an outlier and led to the model saying, well, you know, the net processing revenue was really high in 2020, so probably going to see a really high price in 2021 and that sort of thing. But again, you know, anytime you do a model, things can change. And so certainly there's been a lot of differences between say 2020, 2021, and then 2022 with the big harvest versus that 2011 to 2019 period. But I think it's still a really good way to try to quantify pricing direction and give us a sense of, you know, where things might be headed. So looking at 2022 a little bit more, we don't know what the actual final ex-vessel price is going to be, but the base price was $1.15. And so when you put quality bonuses on top of that, you know, probably somewhere between $1.40 and $1.50. And then if there's retros paid, it could go up from there. So we'll, you know, the modeled price was $1.74. You know, whether we get there is really going to depend on whether retros are paid. And frankly, if retros are paid, you know, that's going to be driven by the wholesale sales performance, where companies are selling their product, you know, kind of as we speak. So again, you know, I think another reason driving that $1.74 price in 2022, if you look down below there at that export price of $4.83, that's a lot higher than we saw in any of the previous years. And so it kind of counterbalances the big harvest volume. And so that's kind of where, you know, that's why the model spits out what it does. I want to show a little bit of data here that we have on our website, and I can show you guys where, you know, we essentially post up these numbers so you can find the harvest volume, the previous season NPR, and the export price on our site. So if you just go to BBRSDA.com, we'll make this bigger here. Go to for the fleet market info. You can find our Bristol Bay Sockeye scorecard. This has sales figures on it for wholesale sales. And so I don't want to draw this out too long, but this is probably the most important thing to keep an eye on. And so you can see down here, this is essentially that net processing revenue figure. This is first wholesale sales value less ex-vessel value. And what we see here is that when that NPR is around 250 million, at least from 2016 to 2018, that provided a good stock of capital to go into the next year. And we saw, you know, generally high prices or strong prices, stronger. And then in 2019, that came down. We had lower prices in 2020, you know, strong market in 2020. The NPR went up quite a bit. Pricing was again stronger in 2021. And so, the big question then obviously is, well, where will it end up in 2022? This sales data lags quite a bit. We should get the next 4 months in like mid to late March. So that'll fill in quite a few of the blanks. But even through the first 3 months, June through August, with July and August being the most important or usually the biggest sales months, we kind of came out of the gate behind the pace from 2021. And, that's not great because a lot more fish were caught. So we'll have to see how this shapes up. But to have a strong price in general, we need to see a lot of big sales numbers coming for these months here. So I think I'm going to move on and talk about export prices. Export data is right here. And, you can see this is the millions of pounds exported each month of frozen H&G sockeye. It's not necessarily all from Bristol Bay, but Bristol Bay is, a big driver for this. Here's how many millions of dollars that was worth. And then we have the average price per pound. And so you can kind of average out the January through May stuff there if you want to make a guess at that. In general, we've seen export prices trend down over the course of 2022. Have data through December there. That just came out, I think today or yesterday. So that's exports. And then, like I said, you can always find the harvest volume or the forecast. We have links to the forecasts down here as well. And you can plug that in the formula and, make your own guesses about what the model would spit out for price. Bear with me as I minimize this. Apologies. So moving on. In general, what we need is more people eating more sockeye more often to help move that big 2022 pack. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking through how fishermen and BBRSDA members can help sell fish. And so some of the ways, share content on social media. We have excellent social media content on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for the account Bristol Bay Sockeye Salmon. That is BBRSDA's sort of funded consumer brand. And, we are sharing fishermen stories on there, recipes, promotions, health information, kind of you name it. And it's a lot of really good content. So that can help. We also have a wholesale purchase inquiry form. And so I'm going to get my browser back here. And if you just, if you're talking to someone and they are looking at buying sockeye in wholesale volumes, we've got a great tool for that. If they're, kind of like, well, where do I get it from? How do I get a good price? Who's got good product? We can send the best suppliers to those people in a really efficient way. So they just go to marketing.bristolbaysockeye.org, go to the wholesale inquiry option here at the top, and then they can fill out what they're looking for, in what quantities and what frequency, and submit that. And then we will distribute this to a bunch of suppliers, and anybody who wants to be on that supplier list can just contact us and get on it. Most of the big ones already are. And then they will be able to follow up with this person about their interest. So in addition, I'm going to kind of go back here quick. I want to make sure people are aware of our consumer website, bristolbaysockeye.org. We've got an excellent fish finder website there that can help people find fish close to them, and I'll show that in a minute. We've got recipes and an excellent cooking guide to help people have a great experience with sockeye. And we've also got, actually on our website, BBRSDA's, we've got a place where you can send us a profile. one of the best ways we can sell fish is to tell fishermen stories. It's a great adventure story. People like to hear where their food comes, and even more so when it's a story kind of as rich as Bristol Bay. So I'm going to show you where to find some of those things. So if we go to bristolbaysockeye.org, we have our recipe library up here at the top, or you can just scroll down and get them here. Brings you to the same place. And we've got all sorts of different recipes. And when you click through them, it's really nice that you don't have to read a huge story to just find the recipe as well. And they're easy to print out as a PDF or paper copy. So excellent recipe library. Like I said, the cooking guide is something that we've worked with a lot of famous chefs on. We've got 5 foolproof ways to prepare sockeye, and we've got kind of simple instructions for that if that's your jam. If you want to watch a video, we've got videos on how to do it. We've got sort of different preparation tips and techniques from chefs, and so you can kind of go on and on there and on how to prepare Bristol Bay sockeye. It's a really excellent tool. I hope more people find it and use it, and we look forward to having that kind of in our arsenal for years to come. As I said, sharing fishermen's stories. If you go to BBRSDA.com and just go under people, there's a fisherman profile form. And basically this just provides a space where you can answer some questions, tell your story, upload some pictures, and then we can use that content to market Bristol Bay sockeye. Because really you guys kind of are the talent and are the heroes, obviously, of this fishery. And we like to tell that story as many places and as often as we can. So finally, and maybe most importantly, if you're at some place that's selling food, whether it's retail or restaurants, and they don't carry sockeye or they're out of it, encourage them to purchase it. It's probably more affordable than it's been in a while. And, of course, it's got all those great health benefits. It tastes great. Now's a great time to be selling sockeye, basically. And they can reach out to BBRSDA as well, and we can help set them up with promotions. We can help them sell that fish. And so I think everybody can win, including the consumers. And so that is kind of a quick run through of market conditions. Explained a little bit about the pricing model, which has really become more of a pricing trend model at this point. We'll probably have another update coming before the season. Certainly we'll have one at our member meeting, which is going to be in Naknek this year on June 9th. So we'll have more information coming out about that. And thank you very much for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send those to info@bbrsda.com. And so for all of us at BBRSDA, this is Andy Wink. Thank you very much. Signing off.